when the Benedict thing happened, when he resigns and we see Francis come about, and especially in this time period in 2023, that's when you're seeing like all of those, the synodality happening, and we're seeing fiducia supplicans coming. Like when I go back and I read Josh's book, we thought this stuff was so eminent because you're seeing Benedict resign and you're seeing this figure of Francis coming. You're seeing these two popes, but Benedict still wearing his white papal robes, being addressed as his holiness. And at that time, I'm like, are we really looking at like a split church? But what was odd about it was that Benedict was like, it wasn't like you had two papal claimants, because Benedict wasn't asking people to. It wasn't like a pope and
but Benedict said he just wanted to be called Father Benedict.
Did he?
Yeah.
He was still
Multiple
addressed
times
as His Holiness. He was still addressed as His Holiness, and not only that, there was still, every time Francis would call a consistory and elect new cardinals, they would then go see Benedict and he would bless them, as if it was like it required Benedict to like. I'm just saying, I'm not even saying I think that anymore. I'm saying at the time that's where my mind was going, and then seeing it in hindsight now, it's like you can absolutely amp up these events in your head to think they're super eminent, but now I'm more like, this story, we don't know how long it plays out, because I do think it's been going on for quite some time. So I don't know how long it plays out, but I still think this is the story arc. And
I agree with that. I mean, I think, I don't know, maybe it's just viewing history and growing up a Catholic. Like, I guess it's just always been the story to me. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. No.
What do you mean?
No, not the way we're talking about it now. This hasn't been the story always, is it? Because when we talked about it back in 2023, you accused me of like defaming the church fathers and stuff. Like this was very shocking stuff to us when we were like, this whole idea
the idea of like it happening like right now is what was shocking. Because like I said, like I don't know, none of this stuff is all that aberrant in the history of the church.
I think that's a crazy thing to say. Like the way this is playing out with the bishops right now, like I don't know, the Arian heresy.
There was once three claimants to the papacy at one time,
right? But there was
three separate cardinal colleges of cardinals.
But there was never a crisis of doctrine the way there is now.
There was the pornocracy. There was Donatism. There was the Protestant Revolution.
Okay. All of those are prefigurements of what we're talking about. Like those schisms it's what Tychonius talks about. Like they're prefigurements. Like he actually
that doesn't mean this is the fulfillment of them. This could be another prefigurement to what comes later.
It could be.
And probability in history would tell us it most likely is.
Yeah. I don't see how this gets restored without.
Why not?
Without going through, but like I said, you're not giving me a viable theory. Though.
It's been restored every other time
without a viable theory. I don't,
it's been restored every other time throughout history.
Yeah. All right.
There was a 30 years war in Europe that lasted 30 years, where a greater percentage of Europe died than World War II, and the church survived that.
Okay, I don't see how that's even applicable to this. I don't see how that scenario is applicable to our times now. I don't see that as like applicable to what we're dealing with right now. Like what we're dealing with right now is just very different.
Of course, it's different. Nothing's ever the same. But if the last 50 years have brought the church so low, why can it not be restored with the next 100 years? Why not?
It can through a severe chastisement. That's the only way, because that's always how God works throughout history.
The 30 Years' War was a chastisement for the Protestant Revolution.
Okay.
I thought you said it wasn't applicable.
No, it was a localized chastisement. I'm talking about
It
that's a localized chastisement, and those happen.
it covered almost the
history.
entirety of the Catholic world at the time.
The 30-year war.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Protestant Reformation was absolutely a type, though. And while that's happening, you have second Christendom exploding in the Americas. Right?
Yeah.
You have the Jesuits who are fighting back against it. Like, what is it that's fighting back?
But while that was happening, Catholic Europe was like destroying itself in the 30 Years' War.
Okay, what mechanism do we have to fight back against the Protestant Reformation that's happening today within the church? Because that Protestant Reformation was
the same tools we've always
pulling
had.
away. What happened?
With the same tools we've always had.
What we no, we don't. We don't have the.
We have prayer. We have raising holy families.
Right. That's true. So, like, what we're up against, it's actually like the answer to it is, we're up against sin, the flesh, and the devil. Right. So the only way through this is actually living holy lives. Like, that's the answer to it. Right. So, like, my point is kind of like the reactionary crowd that we're watching in the Catholic media sphere. It's like you think what Leo's doing is scandalous, so you're amping it up by retweeting it and showing it to the whole world. Like, that's absurd to me. You really think it's so scandalous. Now you're adding to the scandal by doing that. And that's kind of like the only weapons we actually have are what Our Lady told us. It's prayer and penance and fighting sin, the flesh, and the devil. Like, that's actually the only answer to how we handle this. So the Benedict stuff is so, man, Benedict steps down, and the theory is that he sees himself as the bishop in white in the vision in Fatima. And the reason the girls, Lucia says, we saw a bishop in white, we thought this was the Pope. It's like there's this whole theory that, like, Francis was the bishop in white as though seeing him in a mirror, but they thought he was the Pope because he was in white, but he wasn't really the Pope. And that Benedict laying down his papacy the way he did was a moment of him giving up his life like Christ did to allow this force of evil to take hold. Like, it wasn't an act of cowardice. It was an act of courage in order for him to allow God's plan to, like, reveal itself. Then in that little book I got, let me see, hold on. Okay, wait. In reference to the Song of Songs that he reads in a translation that is worded, I don't even know what that word is. He distinguishes a dark church composed of the populace malice of the wicked that forms the body of Satan, and a decora, honest church composed of Christ's faithful. In the present state, the two bodies of the church are inseparably commingled, but according to the apostles' prediction, they will be divided in the end of days. Now, this goes on from the time of our Lord's passion until the church, which keeps it in check, withdraws from the midst of the mystery of lawlessness, so that godlessness may be unveiled in its own time. So what Benedict is doing as the catechone is stepping away to allow this mystery of iniquity to take hold and reveal itself. Like, he knew what was going on, and him stepping down was to actually allow this to reveal itself, because the whole thing in the Catechism is about the mystery of iniquity being revealed. Like, that is the quote in the Catechism, that the mystery of iniquity will be revealed. And what is that mystery of iniquity?
I don't know. I'm torn on his resignation.
Do you think he was a coward?
I mean, it's either what you're saying, or is that he was a coward, and we don't have enough evidence to know his intentions either way. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny because he kind of like left these clues but he
Well,
was so mysterious. Like he was so mysterious.
You're seeing them as clues. That doesn't mean they are clues.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. It's hard to look back at his resignation fondly, considering what came after. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, but he also goes into talking about how the Pope suffers, right? And it's like, I think when he stepped down, like we kind of knew he wanted to have this hermeneutic of continuity. Everything that he did in his 8 years as Pope was undid by Francis. Francis was a Trump figure, right? Like Francis was to the church what Trump was to politics, man. Like he had the same personality type. Like he just came in like a wrecking ball. And Trump did the same thing when Trump came in. And it's like the two men really are so similar, Trump and Francis. But it just kind of, I don't know. I think that Benedict saw this stuff through this Tychonian lens, and he stepped down to allow this. I really do think that's what he was doing. I think he figured that this evil would reveal itself. Now, I don't know how imminent he thought the eschaton was, but I do think he thought this evil is so under the surface right now. He was revealing things like Trump did. Like Trump was this great revealer too, right? When Trump comes in and the way the media reacts to him and the way all of us go from kind of like buying the media narrative to a degree, like the majority of people bought the media narrative for a very, there was always people who didn't buy it, but the majority of the people were just easily propagandized, and then all of a sudden Trump comes and everybody's like, wait a minute, they freaking lie about everything. You see Trump said one thing and they'll just take a little quote and they'll just highlight a simple, a segment of what he said and then lie about everything he said, and that gets us all on Trump's side and all this. And that is what Francis did in the church when Benedict steps down. And I think Benedict saw this evil under the surface, and I think he had that quote that he said, my authority ends at that door. Like, do you remember he had that quote where he had this quote where he was like in the Vatican and he was like, my authority ends at that door. Like he could do little things like write a motu proprio about the liturgy, and he could do little things, but he had no ability to fix the wreckage that was the church that he was dealing with.